Welcome. Today sees the launch of CaffèInsights, which is a series of videos and interviews by some of the leading coffee industry figures, giving their unique or qualified perspective on how to navigate through the current crisis. My name is John Richardson, and I have been an owner-operator and a consultant to the industry for about 29 years now. My main business at the moment is a consultant and coach to coffee shop owners, usually in terms of building sales and profitability, but quite a lot of people development and management training. I was also just about to get into the market again as an owner-operator, but obviously that has been paused. I've written 3 books on running or setting up coffee shops. That first book was basically a book of tips in terms of just lots of things you can do to run a better coffee shop. That second book was basically how to set up a coffee shop. And this final book, which was written just 2 or 3 years ago, was partly written in conjunction with cafe culture. It was based upon a piece of research of 700 coffee shops all throughout the UK in terms of what they felt were the secrets of success in their business, and also 22 much more deep dive interviews on a worldwide basis with coffee shops. I also work with them in terms of a lot of their business. Training sessions at each Cafe Culture event, and we've run 2-day broader business training programs together. So we've worked together for about a decade, and we felt that we had a responsibility to try and help, because obviously there's a tremendous amount of pain out there. We wanted to get a lot of practical advice out there too. So today what I want to try and do, I'm just going to talk today on my own, and then we'll be doing further interviews. Today what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 9 predictions of what I believe will happen. And 12 really practical things that you can do to help your business survive. Not just now, but also when we get open again, because obviously, it's going to be a very different market. So let's start with some facts in terms of the importance of the industry. Hospitality in total is worth about 130 billion to the UK economy. There's somewhere in the region of about 3 million people employed. Coffee shops, of which we've got about 25,000, contribute about 10 billion. So one of the key pieces of context that I have with the cafe culture guys, that we both basically came at from the same perspective, is this country really, really needs hospitality in general, but certainly coffee shops, which is what we're kind of focusing on, to survive. We need them to stay open, and we need them to pay taxes, and we need them to employ people, because the debt that the country is going to have off the back of this is going to be horrendous, over and above all of the other implications. So we need to try and see what we can do to try and help the industry and help people to survive. So why me specifically? Well, apart from all of the kind of hands-on experience I also have a free Facebook group with about 1,500 owners and operators in there. So I'm talking regularly with multiple industry folk, and we're talking about all of the real practicalities of rent and the grants and furloughing systems. So I've got an awful lot of insight into what people are actually thinking. And the second key thing is, which is slightly embarrassing, is I'm quite old, and I think that gives me some decent perspective. I don't necessarily want to give you a whole sort of life history piece, but why I believe that gives me perspective is I was born in Belfast in 1967, and the Troubles kicked off in 1969. So my dad had a furniture business in Belfast, and it was burnt out 3 times. The business then went bust, and we were forced to move. We had to get completely out of Belfast, and so my mum and dad didn't necessarily lose everything, but it was a first deep dive into, and growing up in a country where 3,000 people died during the Troubles. So that was kind of an interesting piece of context and advice. My dad was actually in the Europa Hotel when it was bombed, one of the 17 times that it was bombed. He was okay, but it was a very odd place to grow up in. The second piece of context as to why I think I understand these, or maybe I can speak a little bit more clearly on terms of the living through difficult situations, is my dad then lost his job again through the next recession, and we had to move back down to Belfast when I was 16. So the third piece, and perhaps the most important piece of all in terms of my empathy and understanding of how difficult it can be if you lose your businesses, when I came back to Northern Ireland after going to university, I set up a sandwich business, and we did an awful lot of stuff really well, but we grew far too fast. And I had the biggest sandwich business in Ireland at the age of 28. We had a selection of sandwich bars, stroke cafes, and a factory producing sandwiches. And a biggest sandwich business in Ireland, 28, had lost it all by 29. Now, we grew too fast. There's a whole lot of other complications. We made a lot of mistakes. But the key thing is I lost everything. I've been there. And we had to lay off all 60 people who were employed in the factory. I had to sell all the shops to try and pay off the debts. So we lost everything. So I genuinely understand how tough this can be. And I think that over and above the economic aspect, I think the people and mental health aspect is going to be huge. And I'm afraid we're only at the start of that. So the first thing that I would say with kind of my old wizened head on is focus on you and manage your mental health. I'll give you a tiny piece of context about this again without doing this relentless sort of country and western sob story about me. I was still living in Northern Ireland during the financial crash in 2008, and I'm not sure whether you're aware of it, but the crash in Ireland was much, much larger than it was in the UK, partly because the economy was so overblown. The crash in 2008 happened, and over the next 4 years, there were 479 male suicides directly attributable to that. I don't have the female figures. I have absolutely no doubt that women killed themselves too. Now, I knew one of those people, and he killed himself in his own business because he had lost everything. So this is what happens, unfortunately, in the aftermath of this kind of situation. People cannot sometimes see the wood for the trees. And I think the mental health piece is really, really important. I have a number of stories of personal trauma and trauma to people very, 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 very close to me in the last 10 years. Again, I'm not going to bore you with all of that. But I understand the mental health piece very well. And before we jump into the practicalities, I just wanted to sort of say one thing that I do. I kind of rely upon Stoic philosophy, and in particular, one quote from Epictetus. So we'll move on from philosophy soon, I promise you. The chief task in life is to identify and separate matters so that I can clearly say to myself what are the externals not under my control and what do I have with the choices I actually can control. In other words, focus on what you can do and ignore what you can't control. And believe me, there is a lot that you can do at the moment, regardless of how dark it may be looking. So also what's happening is if you focus on the negatives, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of people talking about this as a fear virus. And I think that's absolutely the case. So if you can try and understand that fear and not let it sort of pull you down, you can then start to productively work on the business, even though you have all of these things running through your head. So whenever we are wanting to try and do something, for example, say, set up a coffee shop, there are basically 3 types of fear that you have. The first fear is when you're trying to do something, you think it's the fear of loss of where you are now. So let's say you're setting up your coffee shop, you then lose the security of the job and a pension and all of those things. That's the first fear you've got to try and defeat. The second fear is a fear of process. As in, the process is going to be really hard. It's going to be really tough to set up this coffee shop. I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't understand it properly. Maybe you read one of my books or whatever, but there are lots of other great books out there. But there's a fear of process and not understanding. That stops us. The third fear is the fear of the outcome. The fear that maybe when the coffee shop is set up, that it just isn't the great thing you wanted, or that it fails. So COVID, this whole process at the moment, you fought those fears to get open, but this whole process at the moment, this COVID thing, attacks all 3 of those fears. I'm not going to carry on and give you any more advice about how to try and deal with that, but what I'm saying is try to think rationally through about this and ignore the fear, because the fear is debilitating. And I understand this because actually I'm in the vulnerable group, as is my daughter, because of asthma. So I have to struggle myself to control the fear. And if I let the fear in, then I'm just not productive and I can't stand and do something like this or go through the work that I've got to do with my clients in terms of changing and work and making sure that their businesses get open. So I'm very aware of it. The sort of the final piece then, well, off the back of that too, I know that this is the case in my Facebook group. Lots of people are finding themselves slightly paralyzed by the fear. So that's what prompted me to go down that route. And I'll give you a little bit of an update. And I'm not saying that the sky isn't falling down, but it sort of isn't. When we left Belfast, we moved up to Portstewart after my dad's business had collapsed. And I ended up spending the rest of my, well, until I was 16, I grew up in an idyllic childhood beside the beach in Portstewart. So that kind of turned out really well. Secondly, after we lost all of our sandwich businesses, inevitably there was a period of kind of humiliation and a lack of energy. But we then opened 2 fish and chip shops, one of which was voted the best fish and chip shop in Ireland, and we built those and sold those very profitably, and then we were then able to go on and open up cafes and garden centres and build the rest of our business again. So there is, even if you lose it all, there are there's a lot that you can learn and then bounce back from. To a large extent, there is no way I could have written that book if I hadn't lost a business, because it gave me such deep insight. Now, that's not me dismissing in any way the fact that there's going to be some real pain out there. It's not through death, and there's going to be some real pain out there for people in the front line in hospitals. What I'm saying is, let's try and focus on what you can do in your business and try and get some insight into what is likely to happen within the marketplace. Okay, so some predictions first of all. First of all, the rent piece is a really big issue sitting out there. It's the final piece of the jigsaw that the government, certainly in the UK, have not really fixed properly at all. The loans aren't great either. But I firmly believe something will happen with this, because businesses are not going to survive. There's no chance that people are going to survive 9 months if we can't get a bit more support. But there is some very solid lobbying going on, amongst others by Jonathan Downey of the Hospitality Union. And I do believe that there will be some help through from the government. I don't know what yet, but it's a piece of the jigsaw. The furlough system has been great. The sort of rates grants piece has been great. The loans aren't great, but I think I'm going to come to that in a second, but there are some ways to try and improve that. So I believe we're going to have some help, some more help on that front. I don't know what, and obviously I don't have a crystal ball. The second thing that we've got to expect is that when we reopen again, the customers are going to be nervous. We don't really know how much they're going to react, and we don't know what way people will behave. But you have to assume that the hospitality industry, people are desperately waiting to try and get out to their favourite coffee shop. So what you want to try and do is to try and judge how it all works. The best thing to do is to analyse what is going on in those countries that are moving out of lockdown. And that's, say, Germany, Denmark, New Zealand, Lithuania and Hong Kong. I just had a conversation this morning with a friend of mine in Hong Kong. And what's happening in Hong Kong is they have reopened the cafes and restaurants. They have not opened bars and gyms. But the cafe and restaurant piece is interesting because obviously that's predominantly our market. Now the rules are you must wear masks and you must have your temperature taken as you go in. And that you also need to work at half capacity. It's not just takeaway only, which may happen, but they're working at half capacity. So some tables are just kind of X'd off. So we can start to see some patterns happening in those countries that are reopening, and then we can start to then make better judgments ourselves. I think that the strong brands strong loyalty will survive best. That's hardly, the world's greatest prediction. But what I mean by that is, certainly if you think about it from the teenager's perspective, they're so desperate to get back to a Nando's or a Wagamama's or something like that. And as I glance through, the Instagram feed of clients or coffee shops that I know very well, the ones with really strong brand loyalty, like this morning 3 in particular I saw from Flat White, Caffeine and Brickwood, all have in their feed people saying that they desperately can't wait to get back and have their Flat White or whatever. So I think we can be, as long as people can, any of these businesses can cash flow this, those strong brands, those people who've built up strong loyalty, are likely to survive much, much better, or rather, they will be busy much faster. The other thing that's going to happen, without a shadow of a doubt, is value will become very important. If we consider that our last kind of big recession was, say, 2008, and we've never really had in our lifetime a Great Depression. And as I say, I don't want to labour the whole issue, but if you think about all of the suicides during the Great Depression, we are going to have the mother of all recessions after this. Now, during the 2008 or post-2008, value became extremely important. And I'll give a couple of examples of that as the enormous growth of Greggs, which is very value-driven, and the enormous growth of Wetherspoons. So the customer that is out there, even if they still have their job or their business and are not too badly financially hit, they are going to be more nervous with how they spend their money. Now, that does not mean you should be dumbing down your menu, but I think making sure that you are clearly providing value will be very important, because coffee shops, as happened in the credit crunch or post-credit crunch, they sat in that affordable luxury category. They sit there like the other example is lipsticks. Even in dire times, people spend money on luxuries like lipsticks and good quality ones. So the kind of the £3 latte, as it were, that post 2008 all of the newspapers were saying you should cut out because it's, if you're saving money. People didn't cut it out. They still wanted that. We sit within an affordable luxury category. So value is important, but hopefully the coffee shop piece will continue to work very well within that affordable luxury piece. Tourism is going to be an interesting one, because tourism is going to be good for some people and bad for some people. So we are going to have more people staying at home. Therefore, if you are operating in an area where we're going to have more domestic tourism, you are likely to do better because there'll just be more people about, because people will not be flying out as much as they have done in the past for a while. If you're in an area where you are relying upon tourists coming in, London, for example, various parts of London, then you are likely to be more challenged. Is probably the delicate way for me to put that. For clarity, foreign tourism was about 24 billion to the economy last year, and UK tourism was about 23 billion. So similar figures, but the point is, if we're going to lose a lot of that foreign tourism coming through, and it will depend very much on your location, whether you will do better out of that or worse out of that. The one thing that I've been banging the drum out for years is neighbourhood coffee shops. They will do better. Community will be, or they will pick up faster, say. Community will be more important than ever. People will be desperate to meet up again, and more people will be continuing to work at home. So if you consider lots of those large companies, accountancy firms, legal firms, all sorts of big firms with big offices have now had to change a lot of their working protocols so that they can get people to work from home. And obviously that's a huge reduction in cost to those businesses. And on an ongoing basis, my assumption is that a lot of those people more people will be allowed to work 1 or 2 days or a week from home. And that means, obviously, working in neighbourhood coffee shops. So that market is they will be visiting neighbourhood coffee shops, because working from home is a very kind of a lonely thing. It's not the joy that people think it is. So if they can take their laptop and go and work in a coffee shop, and I'm aware there are difficulties with that for the operators, the community neighbourhood coffee shops should do better. Now, those beside all of those offices in certain locations, they will be slower to improve, I'm afraid. So when will we open? Well, this is a very difficult question, and I have kind of mulled this over so many times. My best guess is at some stage, mid to late June. We've just had another 3 weeks announced today or yesterday, so I don't know. But if we consider June, then that's something that you can start to work through within your cash flow. We could be much later. There's a lot of talk about coffee shops being the last to open. But that's why I take so much solace in this information about what's happening in Hong Kong and how they can and how they are reopening. So we don't know, and we don't know exactly the format. It may be like it is in Hong Kong. It may not. It may be takeaway only. The sort of 8th prediction is that you will have less competition. In my local high street here, the Carluccio's is shut. We know that a lot of those middle chains are shutting. So Carluccio's actually had a very good or an appealing breakfast and morning offer. So the local coffee shops to that, Carluccio's, will get some of that trade. And there will be knock-on effects across the UK. I've had multiple clients who I do not, who we've had discussions with, who may not manage to make it through it all. I know people who have already shut their doors and will not be opening. The final piece is exactly what happened post 2008 too. We will have this trade down factor. So at that stage, actually, I had I had more restaurant clients in those days, and I had two clients who had Michelin-starred restaurants. And that market was decimated. One of them was a very, very bright operator. He still has 3 restaurants in and around Belfast. And the minute that crash happened, he slashed the offer and the pricing on his in his restaurant. He put on £6 daily main course specials, completely rewrote the menu so that he still had good margin, and he did very well. The other one went bust because people will be, the extreme luxury will still be fine, certain parts of Mayfair and so on, but people will go back where there is real money. But fine dining, it will be hit very hard. So they will trade down to mid-market or upper middle market. But what we do is we generally benefit from that trickle-down effect right at the bottom in terms of cafes and coffee shops. So we should do best out of the eating out piece. But as I say, value will be important, but don't dumb down your offer. Okay, so what can you do? Right. Step number 1 is you need to be working through your cash flow. You need to play around with your cash flow, ideally on a week-by-week basis, and look at all of these things that may happen whenever we do get open again. And that might mean your margin is almost certain to be different. If you're takeaway only, bizarrely, your percentage margin is likely to go up because you'll just be doing lots of coffee, but your average transaction value would definitely fall. So you've got to sit there and work your way through your cash flow. And every time you get a different piece of news, or you understand, for example, the furlough payments should be coming in the next 4 days or something like that at the time that I'm doing this. So you've got to work those through into your cash flow and really, really cut down all unnecessary expense at the bottom line. And when you get open, you're going to have to look at that sort of cash flow and projected P&L and think you're almost certainly going to be operating at break even. Under the current regime, if you're still having to pay full rent, and if the furlough completely goes, rather than some sort of a system where they get a continued half payment of the rates, if everything just kicks back in again, you will be not hit break even for 90% of operators. So you're going to have to look very, very hard at that, and you're going to have to look very hard at your wage bill if suddenly the whole furlough system goes, and you might have to make some very difficult decisions. But your priority is to stay open, as I say, and have a valid business so that you can survive, pay taxes, and employ people in the future. If you are trying to get the government-backed loans or the CBILS, you also, a lot of people are failing to get those. I think the banks are being very obstructive, but also I think a lot of people are not giving the correct information to the bank. So what you basically need is 5 key things. You need very solid financials for the last 2 or 3 years. Your accounts. You need kind of monthly or weekly profit and loss, ideally stock take driven. In other words, you can show them that you have this solid, viable business, or you had this solid, viable business. Then you need a forecasted profit and loss and a forecasted cash flow, the cash flow that I was talking about. And then you need a really, really clear written proposal about what you're going to do. You're going to have to say, look, it's going to be like this. I know I'm in this area. I'm likely to do better or worse because of the tourism piece. I'm expecting that I'm going to that it's going to move up like this. And here's what we're going to have in place to have a solid, viable business after that. So if you haven't got all of those things, I think we're going to put some links down below, or I can certainly send you through a COVID cash flow that I've put together, and also a video where I work you through to show you how to manage your cash and how to work a cash flow like that if you are in a position where you aren't really doing that. The third thing is a really obvious one, and I don't wish it to be a cliche, but you've got to look after your staff across the board. You've got to try and keep communicating with them and continue to do the right thing as best as you can. But you've got to be realistic. But I'm going to be flippant here and say, be kind, there's a lot of pain out there. You're almost certainly in a lot of pain, but a lot of your staff will be as well. And I think a lot of people behaved badly to begin with. They didn't furlough staff that they could furlough. They just made them redundant. And I think we have a situation at the moment where people are going to be remembered in the future for how they behave now. Richard Branson is a classic example. He has destroyed his reputation, rightly or wrongly, with some of his actions. Stelios from EasyJet has done a similar sort of thing. These people are looking for bailouts, but taking out big dividends. On a much lower scale, you will be remembered for how you deal with your staff and your local community in the future. Also, look at delivery. Number 4 is look at delivery. If you feel it is safe, and I have a number of clients that I know are doing it and operating quite well, obviously, almost certainly not getting through the same margins that they got before, but you've got to make sure that you feel comfortable that it's safe. But even if you don't want to do it now, start to work through the planning to consider it in the future. So according to CAM Media, pre-COVID, only 7% of the UK population were using delivery apps. That figure is now 24%. And this will continue for a while. Now, if you've got to there's a piece of work then that you've got to do, perhaps to change your menu, almost certainly to change your menu, so you're not just trying to deliver, coffee, and work the margins through and all of that. And you may need to make some operational changes, some equipment changes in your kitchen. And because people are going to keep doing this for a longer period of time afterwards. So you are better to try and get yourself set up for that now as quickly as possible whilst you've got time, or also try and, if you believe it's safe, put it into your own business now. Now, I know people are very anti some of these platforms because of the percentage charges that they take, Deliveroo in particular. But what you've got to realise is, you've got to look at this in a slightly different way. You can do a completely different menu, but they have a platform which can allow you to get new customers. So you've got to always look at margins, but look at the fact that you are then able to get product out through one of those platforms. And in that product, then you've got your own literature, your own leaflets. You may end up with a customer whenever we get open again. Or also when you are open again, you can often get new customers in that way. And I've got some clients that have used it extremely well like that. So you try and use it as a marketing tool to help you get more customers, new customers. The really, really critical piece, number 5, is do not stop your social media. Again, it comes back to that fear, energy piece. I know I cannot be bothered sometimes with social media myself. I completely get it. But you need the energy to keep using that social media. WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, the usage is all up by about 50% across the board in countries that have been affected, about 70% in Italy. And older people are shifting onto these platforms. They're also even learning how to use Zoom. My 81-year-old mother has now learned how to use Zoom. And that's because they want to communicate with children and grandchildren. And they will continue to do this. So you must be continuing to communicate with your customers. You've got to stay front and center, and you've got to use a sort of a coherent, positive process. Now is the time to be sharing those recipes, to be showing them what is going on behind the scenes, to be demonstrating, if you can get into your shop and safely on your own, or even do it from your own kitchens. The latte art piece, for example, and now is also the time to give away, if everybody's been asking for your banana bread recipe. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that being asked, particularly within specialty coffee shops in London. So now there's real opportunity to engage with your customers. You can show them the new menus that you're working on. But you also need to do, there's a whole process that I have in one of my business trainings. What you've got to do is get engagement, and a really critical piece is ask personal questions. To ask real questions that you get answers from. They may have nothing to do with your business. So it might be, what is the first thing that you are looking forward to doing after lockdown? What is it that you have learned since lockdown? And the reason why you want this is you want people to answer it. You don't really care massively about the answers, but you want the answers appearing on your Instagram or Facebook feed. And that's because then you are to an extent tricking the algorithm that works within Facebook and Instagram, because they're both then seeing that your business has lots of engagement, and therefore they're much more likely to show your business in the feed of your customers, not just now, but also when you finally get open, so that when you get open, you're appearing in your feed. If you go quiet, you will just drop completely off. It doesn't matter how many followers you've had or you have. If you've gone quiet and you haven't had that engagement, you won't appear on anybody's feed. So interestingly, I am on Twitter. I used to use it a lot. I haven't used it for years. I've started tweeting again during all of this. I can guarantee you almost nobody is seeing it because I haven't done any engagement. Now, Twitter's not brilliant as a tool for your business, but think Instagram, Facebook, and work, but keep working at it and keep providing value and connect, but also when people are asking you something or responding, answer. Because again, that Facebook and Instagram, they love that. They want to see engagement. That's what the whole platform's about. More engagement means more people staying on. That's what they're after. Now, another one is consider crowdfunding or pre-bought vouchers or any form of e-commerce. Look at some other way that you can potentially get some more cash through. This will be much easier if you have strong brand loyalty and a strong engaged social media previously. So I have a client who has a wonderful business and is going to really struggle. And she has started crowdfunding just a couple of days ago, and there's already been a very strong reaction. So there are a lot of people out there who really want to support their local coffee shop. And there's a lot of people buying pre-bought vouchers. How long this lasts, we don't know. Will it really work for you if you've got to do 9 months? Probably not, but consider those. The seventh piece is really work on your business. So I got a comment through from a new client the other day. He said he'd wanted to work with me for years, but he had not had the time. He and his wife work, they both work very hands-on in the business. It's a very good business, but now he has time to work on the business. So now we can do all the things that he wouldn't have had time to do, which is, and what I mean by working on is really look at your menu, look at your merchandising, look at your staff training systems, look at your operational systems, look at the costings, create a proper stock-driven profit and loss if you didn't already have one. You need to be open, as lean as possible. You need this business to be much tighter. You've got to think about it almost, depending on your business, think about it as a fresh start. I know some people are opening with a completely fresh start. I'm working with a business in Liverpool, and it will be a completely fresh start when they reopen. So there's a big opportunity for those if you feel that maybe you haven't been doing a lot of stuff the right way. Now, every single percentage point will be vital. The new book that I'm writing during this process is going to be called The Game of 1%. So I don't have the subtitle yet, but the reason behind that is this business it's about little incremental gains. It's about controlling those 0.5% on your margin, 0.5% on your wage costs, just controlling every single piece. And part of the whole process within this book is the piece that I'm working on at the moment is to demonstrate the difference between how many little 1% difference changes makes. You can generally, with a few 1% changes, double your profit at the end of the year. So now is the time to go deep into your business to really look at those things that you can work on. And also the merchandising piece you have to look at your merchandising in terms of what that nervous customer will feel like whenever they come out again. So very open merchandised food will probably won't be allowed. And customers will be nervous about that. So you're going to have to try and look at this, as I say, continue to review what's happening all around the world. So understand the variables. What I mean by that is that the variables that your customer has, some people are concerned that people will just learn how to make better coffee at home. Coffee is 1/5 of what your business is about. Your business is about coffee, food, hospitality, the general environment that you provide, and this kind of this identity, this uniqueness that you have. This strong identity, and it's those 5 reasons why somebody will come and visit you. You've got to look at all of those, break them down, and I have some training on that which I can get a link for that too. But break them down and think, score the business now and improve them all, so that whenever we open again, the customer chooses you rather than your competitor. Because I tell you what, you're going to be scrapping over every penny out there. So. Number 9, follow some key people on Twitter with the proviso that you really restrict your time. You don't fall down the rabbit hole of Twitter, because it's just, it's a bit like YouTube comments sometimes at times. There's so much arguing going on. But on Twitter, there are a number of people with some very good advice. I mentioned following Peninsula on Twitter Following Peninsula on Twitter, the HR firm, is very beneficial if you are not quite clear on some of the staffing aspects of it. They have a lot of free information. But also follow Jonathan Downey, follow UK Hospitality. Kate will put these links below. Follow The Caterer, follow Caffeine Magazine. You can follow mine, which is the coffee tweet, even though I'm not tweeting very much. Generally what I'm doing is creating other people's stuff. I probably will start to use it a bit more. But use this information to then help communicate with your staff and also to keep going back to your cash flow and working on your planning. So number 10 is talk to your and engage with your competitors and friends. Join my Facebook group if you haven't already done it. It's called Cafe and Coffee Shop Owners. That's lots and lots. It's only for owners. It's lots of people. It is actually worldwide, but it's lots of people. It's about half UK. Lots of people debating and coming up with links and techniques and how they spoke to their accountant or how they managed to get the various grants. So there's a lot of very positive stuff in there. I don't let anything negative in at all. So talk. If you don't want to do that, make sure you're talking to other people in the industry. And finally, keep an eye out for more of these videos from Cafe Culture. I'll be sending them through to my email list as well. I won't be doing them all, but I will be interviewing some very successful coffee shop owners. And there will be interviews with roasters and some other key industry people. We've got quite an interesting bunch coming together. And the focus is entirely on trying to provide you with practical help and advice. Final thing, reach out to me if you need some help with any of that stuff that I was talking about. Either via my Facebook group or email me at john@thecoffeeboys.com. We'll have a link down below, but certainly we have programs to try and help you then do that reworking on the business. But look, thank you for your time. I went over a bit longer than I thought, but I hope that was of some benefit. And I think certainly the future ones that we have, where I do more interviews, will be very beneficial.